is the way you pronounce it. And I've got an R.L. Allen Bible that the print's almost as big as this. Very, very well-made Bibles, but you're looking at, between $125 and $250, depending on which grade of leather you get and different things. But if you buy one of those, it'll last you for years and years and years. And so I encourage you, get you a good Bible. And, most of us, when we want a fishing reel, we don't want a Zebco 202. We want something better than that. And so I would encourage you to scrape your pennies and nickels together, and it's worth it to get a very nice Bible. And they'll hold together. The paper will stay, crisp. It won't wrinkle and just be easy to read up for a long time. I encourage Christians to spend money on books because I want you to read. And if you want your children to read, you're going to have to read. They see you reading or you read to them. And you say, well, we can do that on our Kindle. I know you can. But I don't think that's a really good habit for your kids to get into. They probably stick their face in a screen often enough. And having a book in their hand is, I think, an ideal thing to do. And there's a plethora of good Christian material on every age level and every maturity level that you can get. 1 Kings chapter 17, I want to bring a message on how blind can you be. How blind can you be? You ever talk to someone and it seemed like you were talking to a wall or a lump? It just, what you were saying wasn't registering, and you're thinking, how blind can you be? How unthinking can you be? Why don't you consider what I'm telling you, because I know what the result is going to be. Well, we're going to see some of that tonight. And Elijah the Tishbite. Now, what's a Tishbite? It's somebody from Tish. That's all we can say. We don't know much about Elijah.
Tish is not an insect.
No, it's not an insect. He just showed up. He just appeared. He was of the inhabitants of Gilead, and really that's about all we know about him. He said unto Ahab, as the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. Now, you have to remember, Ahab is married to Jezebel. Ahab is the most wicked king that the nation of Israel ever had. He was it. Jezebel was the worst queen that they ever had. And so God just raises up this unusual prophet, and he had probably been in I don't think he just started being a prophet, bam, like this, but he was probably unknown to the king and maybe known to the population somewhat, and his word carried some weight. So he said, it's not going to rain until I say so. Now, he's doing that not under his own authority, but the authority of God. And the word of the Lord came on him, saying, get thee hence, and turn thee eastward, and hide thyself by the brook Cherith that is before Jordan. And I don't have time to go through that section that didn't waste and the cruse of oil that didn't waste. So there's a drought. Now, this drought is 3 years long. So Ahab has been a wicked king. The water dries up. We read about that in verse 7 of chapter 17. This wicked king, and he starts hunting and looking for Elijah. He wants to do him in. He wants to do something to him. Probably try to 3rd year, saying, go show thyself unto Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. And Elijah went to show himself unto Ahab, and there was a sore famine in Samaria. And Ahab called Obadiah, which was the governor of his house, and Obadiah feared the Lord greatly, for it was so when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord, that meant she killed them. Wasn't just that she pitched them out of office, she killed them. that Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water, probably all he could get. And Ahab said unto Obadiah, Go unto the land, and unto all fountains of water, unto all brooks, peradventure we may find grass to save the horses, and mules alive, that we lose not all the beast. So they divided the land between them to pass, and we'll come back here, and the king will wind up killing me. And I am not a bad guy in this story. I'm not a negative. And so Elijah assures him, I'm going to stay right here. I'm not going anywhere. And so he meets Ahab. Verse 17. And it came to pass when Ahab saw Elijah that Ahab said unto him, Art thou he that troubleth Israel? Now let's start getting the blindness that Ahab has. Elijah the Tishbite just shows up and says, by the authority of God, it's not going to rain until I say so. 3 years have gone by and it hadn't rained. I like Elijah. And he answered and said, I've not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house, in that ye have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and hast followed Balaam. Now therefore send and gather to me all Israel unto Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal 450. These 400 which eat at Jezebel, and hint, hint, your wife's table. So Ahab sent all the children of Israel and gathered the prophets together unto Mount Carmel. So there's 850 of these false prophets. And remember, Elijah's the one towards a guy that had been able to get some action done. But instead, he still believes in his 850 false prophets. So Elijah comes to all the people, and Elijah has a question. And he asks this: how long is a word that they tell me describes someone who is maybe like in a tree, and they've got their foot on one limb that's one dimension and the other foot on another limb that's a smaller dimension, and so they're constantly trying to catch their balance. And so the picture is, you know, someone who's out of balance, and people don't answer him. You know, he says, if the Lord, Jehovah, be God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him. And the people answered him not a word. I got one question: how blind can you be? The king didn't see it. The people didn't see it. Remember, God answers from heaven with fire out of heaven, then he's going to be God. And so the people say, well, that's fine. So these 850 prophets, they cut up their bullet, and they dance around, they chant, they jump up and down on the altar. They cut themselves, they're bleeding. And Elijah, isn't he? He's putting it on them. And it came to pass when midday was past, verse 29, they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, and there was neither voice nor any to answer, nor any that regarded. And Elijah said, the people, come near. So he takes his precious, and he said, all right. And he dug a trench around the altar. He said, pour the 4 barrels. And they do that 3 times. So there's 12 barrels of water that fire falls from heaven, burns up the sacrifice, burns up the rocks, licks up all the water out of there. And of course, then the people are saying, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. But you just got to ask, how blind? How blind can you be? Physically. Samson was not good at choosing women. You may have had a friend like that when you were in school, or somebody you've known. They just couldn't pick a good one, no matter what they did. Well, look in chapter 14, verse 1. And said people weren't to marry outside of the nation of Israel. And the picture for that is us. That's not a racial thing at all. The picture of that is for us that we're not to marry outside of our faith. We're not to marry someone who's an unbeliever. So he sees this daughter of the Philistines. He came up and told his father and his mother and said, I've seen a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. Now that goest to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? And Delilah. Samson is just no good at picking women. I'm sure his parents said to him, son, can't you see all these bad choices you're making? Can't you see this? How blind can you be? I imagine his mother said that to him. Samson had already been tricked once. Look back in chapter 14. Chapter 14 and verse 16. Chapter 14 and verse 16. Samson's wife wept before him. Remember, he's put out a riddle. He killed a lion, and when he came back by, some honeybees had made a hive in there, and he got some honey. He wasn't supposed to touch a dead carcass, do any of those things, and so he gave his parents some of the honey, didn't tell them where it came from. So he puts forth a riddle, about the fierceness of a lion and the sweetness of honey. And all the guys who are at the wedding feast, they all have to give him one change of raiment if they can't answer his riddle. And he has to give all of them one, and he'd have to give out 30 if they do answer his riddle. And of course, they couldn't. And so they went after his wife and said, look, we're going to kill you if you don't tell us. All this was easily predictable. Why? He's messing with the enemies of his nation. He's messing with people who hate his people. Verse 16, Samson's wife wept before him. Thou dost but hate me, lovest me not. Thou hast put forth a riddle unto the children of my people, and hast not told it me. He said unto her, behold, I have not told it my father nor my mother, and shall I tell it thee? And she wept before him the 7 days while their feast lasted. And it came to pass on the 7th day he told her, because she lay sore upon him, and she told the riddle to the children of her people. Verse 18, and the men of the city said to him on the 7th day before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey, what's stronger than a lion? And he said unto them, if ye had not plowed with my heifer, ye had not found out my riddle. That's some plain country talk, isn't it? He'd already been tricked. Samson, how blind can you be? Can you be? Samson was blind before he was blind. Look in chapter 16. Chapter 16, verse 6, and Delilah says to Samson, tell me, I pray thee, wherein thy great strength lieth. Now remember what's happened. She's a Philistine too. And so the lords of the Philistines have come up and said, look, we will make you rich. We'll give you all these pieces of silver, 1,100 pieces each, and we'll make you rich, and just find out, what's the source of his strength. Probably in your mind's eye, when you see Samson, you're thinking about the Hulk. Big muscled. I think he looked like a normal guy, but had supernatural strength. Because he's all. How blind can you be? Remember the last time this happened? And, how can we bind you to afflict you? New ropes. Bound him therewith and said, and the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. How blind can you be, Samson? Everything you tell her she's doing, and then she hollers out, the Philistines are here. And there were liars in wait abiding in the chamber, and he brake them from off his arms like a thread. Verse 13. And Delilah said unto Samson, hitherto hast thou mocked me and told me lies. How can I trust you if you keep lying to me? Tell me wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said, if thou weavest the 7 locks of my head with the web. You see what's happened? She's starting to break him down, getting a little closer to the truth. So she fastened it with a pin and said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awaked out of his sleep and went away with the pin of the beam and with the web. Every time he goes to sleep, he wakes up with what he told her would make him weak, and he's still so blind that he doesn't see it. Verse 15. She said, how canst thou say, I love thee, When thine heart is not with me, thou hast mocked me these 3 times, and hast not told me wherein thy great strength lieth. Came to pass when she pressed him daily with her words, and urged him so that his soul was vexed unto death, that he told her all his heart, and said, There hath not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. How blind can you be, Samson? And when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, Come up this once, for he has showed me all his heart. The lords of the Philistines come there and brought money in their hand. She made him sleep upon her knees, called for a man, and caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. How sound asleep you got to be for somebody to shave your noggin? Especially when you've never had a haircut before. It's not like he'd had a haircut or 2, and this was. The Philistines be upon thee, and he awoke out of his sleep and said, I will go out as at other times and shake myself. Now catch this last sentence. And he wist not that the Lord was departed from him. That word wist is an old English word that means this. He didn't know. He didn't realize. Now you know the rest of the story, how that his hair begins to grow back and he pulls the building down and kills all those people. But what a price he paid. And it was paid because he made bad decisions. When a man... Acts chapter number 9. Here's a fellow who starts out blind, but is going to end up seeing. Saul people out of worshiping God. He killed people. He was consenting unto the death of Stephen, and you find that in the end of chapter 7 and the first part of chapter number 8. So Saul was blind. He did not see the glory of God in this. Didst thou me? He's saying, Saul, how blind can you be? And this is what Saul says. Who art thou, Lord? He knew. He knew he was in the presence of God. He's looking for some answers. He's going to get his eyes open. Look in verse number 15. He falls to the ground. When he gets up, he can't see, verse number 9. But in verse 15, but the Lord said unto him, who Ananias, go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me. Paul spends the rest of his life trying to help other people get their eyes open. That's what he does. You read about it in Acts chapter 17. He said, I've been sent to open the eyes of the blind, taking a text from over in the Old Testament. So here's a guy who was blind with his eyes open. Hath his eyes open. Balaam is a man who went to hell with his eyes open. You remember he delivered those messages. I don't think he had any option. I think God compelled him to deliver the good messages about the nation of Israel. He liked money. And when he found out he could get a lot of money, he wanted to go. He was just scared. But look in verse number 11 in the book of Jude. Woe to them, for they've gone in the way of Cain, who didn't believe in blood atonement, and grieve the minds of them that believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. There are some people who know some things, and yet the available resources in the way of books and materials that we have, and yet they're as advanced, if not more so, in their Christianity than we are. So we're not to hate our brother. And if we hate our brother, we're in darkness. And darkness makes you do dumb things. You stub your toes in the dark. You fall over things in the dark. Look in the book of 2 Kings with me just a minute. 2 Kings chapter 6. Verse 15. The Syrians have surrounded Elisha and his servant. The servant gets up, walks outside, and sees we're surrounded. We're surrounded. And so in verse 15, when the servant of the man of God was risen early, had gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots, and his servant said to him, Alas, my master, how shall we do? What's going to happen to us, is the question. And he answered and said, Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. Now that servant's looking around and going, is there another army that I haven't seen yet? That's right. In verse 17, Elisha prayed, said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. We get our strength from having our eyes open. You know, I preach Sunday morning on prayer. And perhaps one of the things we ought to be praying about is God help us see right. Do you remember in the scriptures there was a blind man, and Jesus touched his eyes, and then he said, What do you see? He said, I see men like trees. In other words, I see, but I don't see clearly. And then the Lord touched him again, and he said, Now I see clearly. I see men distinctly. We need our eyes all the way open. And it might scare us. You know, when we begin to see things spiritually, it may make such an impact on us that we're going to turn and go another direction, or we'll say, wait a minute, this is not good. I need to do this over here. Get your eyes open. Spend some time with the Lord. And just remember, when it looks bad, there's more with us than there is with them. And you and God make a majority. How blind can you be? King Ahab was terribly blind. The entire Jewish nation was blind. And one man got him to, at least for a while, to look. Samson, strongest man in the world. How blind could you be? King Solomon. The strangest verse about King Solomon is this: but Solomon loved many strange women. You're wired for one woman. You're not wired for 1,000. That's just an odd verse to me. Solomon loved many strange women. What did that do to him? Caused him to start building altars to false gods. Solomon, how blind can you be? Saul, what an example he is. You know, I don't see everything. I don't know everything. But I do know this. I'm like that guy in John 9. I once was blind, but now I see. Let's tell the world we see. Father, take the message. Use it to the glory of God. In Jesus' name, amen. You're dismissed.
Amen.